do begin, there might be a bit of like, or I guess you can like start up and then we can talk about this. Yeah.
Sure. I
like
had actually started 4 seconds ago.
I just noticed. Yeah. The exact like claim or whatever.
Yes.
Because essentially it's kind of like an opposition claim almost. Because
Okay.
I do hear a lot of like challenging like trans people claims or gender claims or things like that. And I don't often hear people making the other claim.
Okay.
So it's the wording could be kind of different, or depending on what you think might be the most interesting or maybe the best to tease out my position or something like that. And yeah, something around basically that either trans people exist or trans people are valid or trans women are women or trans women, what makes trans women is the same thing that makes women women or something like that around that area.
Okay. So we'll refine it as we go with the definition. So but I'm just going to ask you a bunch of questions. We'll see if we come up with a clear, concise claim.
Sure.
All right. So people. What are people?
People. This is where Pine Creek would absolutely hate me because he's like, "Come on, why are you taking so long to give an answer?" It's like, well, I don't want to give a blanket answer.
I'm the opposite of Pine Creek here. It's hearing you out too long.
Like
so,
it's like my brain is like, okay, yeah, just say what people. Oh wait, what if you say something that's like not people in the end? So yeah, people.
But we're still working out the claim here. So
yeah.
Besides, it's not as if I'm going to hold you to not changing your mind about anything.
People are like human beings who, I guess they don't even have to be conscious or whatever. They like people are, yeah, members of the human species who.
Okay.
Yeah.
Humans.
Or maybe you could have aliens.
Members of the human species.
Yeah.
Okay, so let me throw some edge cases out there. Are people that are in a coma members of the human species? Are they people?
Yeah, because it's an unconscious person. I might even change it to like beings, because you could, depending on like how you're using it, it might be like an alien person. So it might just be beings. There's like a difference between a person and an animal, basically. So yeah, beings that can enter.
Wait, we're not. Are we animals?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's not the difference between then that I can work from because it's within the Venn diagram. Doesn't matter.
The thing that my brain's telling me to say is it's like someone who's conscious and like can enter a social agreement, but then you have these edge cases where like someone's in a coma or someone's mentally unable to like be conscious of those things, or those types of things, and I still call those people. So
how about there's a child that is born but that for some reason has not yet become conscious? Are they a person still, or yet?
Yeah.
Are they a person yet?
They've been born. Yeah.
Okay. How about before they're born? Do you tie the birth date to when they achieve becoming personhood?
To me, it's something to do with like survivability or outside the wombness, like that whole kind of abortion debate thing. It's when you're like your own self-sustaining thing, I guess.
When you have whatever fraction of a chance, maybe it's 50-50, of surviving outside mom. Okay.
That would be a person. Yeah.
Okay, cool. That works real well with the Roe v. Wade thing that's been the standard in the U.S. for a long time up until recently.
Okay.
Which is they just set it at 22, 24 weeks. Based on that 50-50, they preemies at that age have a 50%. I think that's what they set it to, and I might be being over precise. Anyway, this is just being tedious as heck about the definition of people. And what I heard in that definition is conscious or potentially becoming conscious or likely to, has the potential of. Maybe I wrote that in my own understanding.
No, you are right. It's my bad wording that you're repeating back that I'm kind of like seeing the issues with, because it's like, I don't know, like a plant, a tree. The tree species of the great oak could potentially become conscious in a bazillion years. Like that sort of
Sure.
Or
that's
like,
what I'm saying. Has a significant potential.
That's a good keyword. Yeah.
Not it's logically possible.
Right.
Like in the same sense that we're not saying that an 18-week preemie couldn't possibly. Right. It's just that it's a vanishingly small chance. And
that's the keyword. Yeah.
20-something, it has a 50-50 and with modern tech. And as tech gets better, I bet that number goes down.
Yeah.
But I'm optimistic.
Yeah.
Trans people. What is trans?
So not cis.
Not cis. Okay, cis.
There is an easy
nominal, normal, common. So not nominal, normal, common. So not in the middle of a bell curve of some nature.
Yeah, or I guess the other way. That's just a quick way to do it, I guess, because then you get into what's cis, and that's like and then you're going off from that. But what is trans is the actual, I guess, answer is someone whose gender identity isn't what they were assigned. Okay.
So trans is about gender and identity.
And yeah.
Okay. So I have someone I follow who grew up in China. Is still in China. And when they popped out of mama, everybody recognized them as female. Had all female obvious parts in diaper bits. And the parents had, before they were born, told everybody that it was a boy. Maybe they had ultrasound that turned out wrong. Who knows what their reason was? But there was a significant social stigma. I'm getting this through the person's own report, so it's just whatever they told me. That there was a significant social stigma, so the parents never admitted to their neighbors that the baby wasn't male.
Right. Okay.
So they grew up faking. They grew up from out of diapers all the way up to teenage, externally male, while having the parts of a female.
Yeah, that must have been really. Can't even imagine like the pressure and the stress of that. Yeah.
Crazy stuff. Then they went to camp, and then also there was parents moved to a new city, got new neighbors, and she was able to become she, and bloomed and kind of overbloomed, and eventually got big boobs going on, and her Dolly Parton is her hero. Okay. Now, she also found out she was a lesbian, but I don't think that has anything to do with the question of trans, right?
No.
It's not about it's not about sexual preferences or gender preferences, or Yeah,
they can. Well, that will change the label.
Yeah.
But it won't change like your attraction.
Yeah. Her attraction is to innies, not outies. But anyway,
kind of sexual. Yeah.
So, gynosexual. Yeah. So actually, I'm not even sure what her attraction is relative to gender. I've only heard her refer to
parts.
Yeah, she hasn't talked about her attraction relating to trans or not trans. It hasn't come up. Anyway, so this is a person by the way, the name of this person is Naomi Wu, and they're on YouTube.
Mhm.
So I'm speaking of somebody who's told this story in public. That's where I saw it. And I'm thinking I qualify Naomi as trans.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it's a trans with an asterisk. Or maybe Naomi was trans until sometime in her teenage years when she became cis. Is that, what do you think about that?
So the way I think about it is she was, remind me of that, she was born
She's born female.
female, and then the scans were saying that she was going to be a male.
No, the parents, either because they got a bad ultrasound or maybe it was wishful thinking, told all the neighbors it was going to be male.
Okay.
And then when she was born, she popped out female, and the parents never admitted it, and she was under great social pressure to conform with the parents' intentions. So she was forced trans from birth.
So I guess the issue I kind of have with that is like the trans label is like how you are, how you feel inside.
Yeah.
Not what you represent. So like it's like before you come out, it's not like you weren't trans or gay or something like that. It's just what you're displaying to the world. So if her true identity was, you know, a woman, and that's what she felt like on the inside, but she's having to pretend to everybody that she's a man, then to me, it's not that she is trans, it's that she's been kind of forced to pretend to be.
Okay, she's been forced into a pretense, and that would not qualify her as trans, even though her gender identity was male for those years, because it didn't work with her internal state.
Yeah, like her internal state is woman, and she was, by, you know, doctors and by society, other than those being lied to, she was identified as, you know, woman.
Yeah.
And so, and then when she's talking to people or presenting with people, she would kind of be, the key thing is like her gender identity inside isn't switching at that point. It's just what she's presenting. So it's kind of like saying,
as much as you can say it fits, because I suppose as a kid, if you said you are male, you know, there's I'm getting caught up.
The way I like struggle with it is it's like if someone was like forced to say they were straight for years, but they inside they weren't, they were gay or bi.
Right.
And it's like that person would still be gay or bi, even if they're saying that they're straight. And so would that person have been straight for all those years? Well, not really, but yeah. And then so like it's like a weird label, because the way I'm using it is, you know, it's the gender identity inside is different to what they were assigned at birth.
Yeah.
And so that status isn't changing. It's just how they're presenting that gender identity to people.
Okay. So whether a person is trans or not is slightly independent of their gender expression. I mean, there's a correlation. There's obviously a forcing function. But they could present as this, be trans. You might not know it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. So I've got a different friend. Again, I'm choosing only people that are in public so that I can speak with them without a privacy question. So I have this friend that I've been following for, I guess it's been about 13 years now. And I could tell they were queer, but they appeared out in the world to be in a normal monogamous male-female marriage, and that was great. It's like, fine. And I always assumed there were shenanigans going on in the background, and that wasn't being talked about. Okay, fine. It doesn't matter. I'm happy for people to have fun.
It works for them.
It,
yeah.
I was wrong in that assumption. It turns
Okay.
out there were no shenanigans.
Okay.
And then about, what is it, 19 or 20? 19 maybe. My friend dropped off camera, had other people take care of things, and showed up like 18 months later, having lost a huge amount of weight, having lost a beard, completely different haircut, looking very pretty. And I went, ooh, and said, I'm changing my name from Benjamin to Jamie. Jamie's inside Benjamin. It was there all the time. And reports that that there was this inkling at one time. The first time they had thought about it was, and told a story about being in a control room. Jamie's a video engineer. In a control room, went, oh no, put that away. And then it actually really hit in like 18 or 19, whatever. I'm not sure about the exact times. And it was like, oh, I can't put this away anymore. And talked to her wife. The him and the her. Talk to his wife. When I speak of Jamie, I speak in both genders. I speak Benjamin when I'm speaking of the Benjamin time, and I speak of Jamie, and I use a she following.
It kind of depends. Like some people have preferences, don't they?
Yeah, it's a question of tense.
Yeah. Some people have some people would, I guess, I think it's a smaller portion, but some people are kind of a bit like,
they would prefer a retroactive reference.
Yeah, and like for you to distinguish
with Naomi
some other way, but most people are like fine with that.
Using the example of Naomi, if I'm referring to Naomi when she was 8, is that right? Or when he was 8?
Yeah, I mean, it depends what Naomi wants, right? But I think
right.
Usually you're okay kind of just assuming.
Naomi doesn't identify as trans.
Okay.
Naomi
Naomi, the other
female who was asked to play a role for a really long time. And that affected her so much that her presentation of gender is off the charts. It's pushed up to 11, which is fine. And beside the point, but yeah, it's the question of their. Now, in the case of Jamie's very clear. Use whichever pronouns come naturally to you. I don't want to ask you for a particular pronoun. I want the data.
Okay.
I'm an engineer. I want the data. I want to understand what people have without. And of course she says, and my friends know what I'm going for, so they will try to please me. So they will do it. And so for that part, the data is not useful, but very engineering mode. I'm not sure what point I was trying to make about Jamie and the timing and the so I've known Jamie for a long time before Jamie knew Jamie was trans. Back when I first met Jamie, was Jamie trans?
So there's a lot into how I would think about answering that question. The first thing that comes to mind is transness something to do with the whole societal aspect? And so like the way I'm thinking about this is so like trans-binary people, so someone who, like say not non-binary people, if we keep them separate for now.
Yeah.
Someone who's trans-binary maybe wouldn't exist in a androgynous society as trans, or a society where it wasn't androgynous, but there was just no societal, not awareness, recognition of gender. So if it was as important as how wide your nostrils are or something like that, like we don't categorize people or notice that at all in any way. Like if it was like that, then would probably be less trans-binary people.
Okay.
So what I'm thinking is
an issue, it wouldn't become something important to them. And I'm assuming that only if this is important to the person would trans apply? Because otherwise it would be cis. Something like that?
Could you ask the question again?
Let me try it again. So in a situation where the person we're talking about doesn't care about that status, then it would be just rendered cis, no matter what the details, because cis just means within the norm, within the main mode, within the main category.
I think I understand what you're asking, but the wording is a bit different.
If
So
I didn't care at all about race,
yeah,
I couldn't have a race. Somebody else might think I'm a particular race. I say I'm not from the Caucasus Mountains.
But would that make you like...
My genes come from France and
cis
Scotland.
race?
Yes, cis race. Yeah. What's my race? Human, cis. Whatever.
Let me just think how cis would apply in this case to it, because cis would mean like... Because cis means you would kind of... you would have to recognize, right? You would like say, I am... Let's say you were black. You say, I am black. That would be cis.
Yeah. Black would be cis.
So it's like saying if somebody doesn't care about the label trans and they're not applying that to themselves, would they be cis? Like, no, because
no. Okay.
So
it's underdetermined at that point. We can't choose one of those labels if they don't care about that thing. I know I'm talking about trans people, whether it's gender or not trans here. So I'm really playing with the definition.
The care word is the one the care one is the one I'm tripping up on, because it's like like in labeling someone as gay or straight.
Yes.
Does it matter like if the determination is that they're attracted to certain people and they are attracted to those types of people, if they care about that or not doesn't come into like the labeling of them, kind of.
What about if their local society doesn't care?
That's the good thing that I was trying to kind of get to, that would reduce cis or trans or maybe even gay people. Yeah, if there was no noticing of what types of people you select in society, there would probably be less gay or straight people, because that wouldn't be like counted, right? You wouldn't see that division, and it just wouldn't be like a thing that we would group or notice, sort of, right?
Okay.
Just like in the same way, like there's probably people out there with 0.5 centimeter smaller nostrils that like we'd have no idea of, because we just don't pay attention to that thing.
Right. Yeah, I've known people with very narrow nostrils.
So there might be, it's like we're talking about the narrowies and the widies.
Yes.
Right. And would there be less narrowies and widies in the world we have now? Yes, because we don't categorize narrowies and widies.
Yeah. It's not something we care about much.
So yeah, the label would go down. Now, the interesting thing about the gender is like how it interacts with the societal stuff, right? So like not noticing whether people have like narrowies or widies doesn't affect like your inner take or inner analysis of your own like narrows or whiteys, narrows or widies. Whereas if you're like considering where you fit on like in gender and society and all of these kind of like roles or expectations or norms, or you're in a different culture and you go to a different culture and you see the differences there or something like that, that could affect like sort of how you would label things, I guess, or could affect like how you might be trans in one time or culture and not trans in another time or culture or something like that, depending on how that society views you and assigns you and all that sort of stuff. That's sort of changed by how society and you see those, categorize those things. Whereas we kind of, with narrows and wides, like there is no kind of like swapping that between cultures and all this interpretation and societal stuff built on it.
Yeah, I think the example of narrows and wides and that kind of thing really shows the gradient nature of what you're talking about, because I would assume that nostril width is not modal, doesn't have a strong central point in the curve. Okay, so we have trans people are. So I think we figured out who trans people are. Or no, sorry, I think we figured out what trans means and what people means. What's the part after the ellipses? What is something we want to say about trans people in your claim?
Well, usually just maybe countering the things that we often hear that aren't challenged as much. So trans people aren't real or aren't valid or aren't who they say they are, or have ulterior motives, or trans women aren't women, or trans men aren't men, or non-binary people aren't trans, even though that's kind of a more meta discussion.
Okay. All right. So then I'll just ask you a bunch of different those different questions, and we'll treat them all like little subclaims.
Sure.
Trans. Okay. If I say trans women are women, and I say trans men are men, am I saying anything different, or am I saying one thing?
You are saying two things, because there might be some people out there who, for some reason, accept trans women but not trans men.
Okay. All right. In your opinion, am I saying something that's 1 + 1 = 2 and 2 - 1 = 1? It's the same thing. It's just rearranged. That if one is true, the other is true?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. It could be shown to me that, you know, like the position I just kind of described is the case or something, and then I wouldn't be like that. I would be like it's asymmetrical or something, but yeah.
Okay. I guess it depends on your definition of woman. If you say a woman is someone who could potentially birth a baby, then obviously medical science could change what that rule means later. But for right now, trans women can't birth babies. Therefore, doesn't qualify as a woman, and man is anyone that's not a woman. If I were to define the terms that way, then trans women are women is false. Trans women are men is false. Trans men are men. But that's an idiosyncratic definition, but one that probably a lot of people would warm up to.
And some trans women wouldn't be, well, some trans men wouldn't be women. Oh wait, hang on.
Right, some trans women. Right.
Some trans women wouldn't be women.
Yeah,
because not everyone in that category would be able to give birth.
I briefly dated a lovely person who was a natural intersex thing, and had a full beard and a lovely chest hair and female parts, and none of this was surgical, and had the problem of twice having self-impregnated, because apparently one gonad worked one way and one gonad worked the other way.
Okay.
Yeah, that was a weird one. That was all kind of medical strangeness. Anyway, and fine. That's not how I define women. How do you define women? What's a woman to you?
Well, it kind of depends how long you want the answer to be. So the short answer is like a woman who identifies as the categorization or the category of woman, and then we go into, well, it's kind of circular. What do you mean by the categorization, or what those sorts of things? And those are like societal reinforcements or expectations or gender roles.
Okay, so a woman is about societal expectation, gender roles, presentation, that kind of thing?
There's like an alignment with biology as well, of course.
Okay.
Those sorts of things.
So sex and gender. Tell me about the difference between those two terms.
Well, sex is purely biological.
Sex is purely biological.
Gender
and
includes lots of things, so like those things
Okay.
I mentioned as well.
Right. Is and when you're referring to woman, you're referring to sex or gender?
Gender.
Or both? Gender.
Gender.
Okay. What's the word for sex that
Female,
correlates
male?
with woman? Female.
Female.
Okay. So I can say male, female on sex side, and I can say woman, man on the gender side. And I'm going to exclude minors from the question so I don't have to think about what girls and boys mean. Just
Right.
for convenience sake in the moment, I'm only going to talk about adults.
Yeah.
Because that's an entire other show. Which is planned about 2 weeks from now. Anyway, different guest. A big hot button is sports.
Mm-hmm. My initial thoughts really quickly are it's up to the sporting bodies. I'd hope that they would know and try and regulate things to make it safe and fair. And when I try and talk to people about this sports issue, like the thing I get a lot is like I want it to be fair and safe, and those are my main priorities. And I look to the experts, like the scientists or the people who have, the experts in that sport or whatever, the people who have done that thing for years and years and trained people or whatever, and they have methods that are like scientifically produced or whatever, right? Those are the people, like I want those, like if we're talking about F1 or boxing or like a combat sport, something like that, if they tell me that like sex isn't the best classification for safety, and that they're using other classifications like weight on maybe they would do with a combat sport, they might say to me, look, it's bone density that we really need to look at, and it would be all of those things that they're telling me that we would make these classification groups from, and these championships and things like that from. And to me, the thing that we would prioritize are fairness and safety.
Cool.
I think if you did that across the board, sports wouldn't be split along the sexes. That'd be like you'd find that in maybe some sports, but that'd be like the odd one out, I think.
Yeah. I basically see two bell curves slightly offset from each other depending on what we're measuring, body mass index or power or weight or whatever. And I see these two bell curves, and the sports are the bell end on one side. The competitors in a sport are the bell enders on one side of a particular measurement. If it's basketball, maybe it's height. If it's football, maybe it's mass. I don't know, or power to weight ratio or something. And so obviously even if the overall distribution is only a little different in the thing you're measuring, the bell end is going to be a lot different. The area of the bell end, if you only select for the top few percent, might not even overlap.
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends on the sport, because there might be like sports where you need to be big and nimble or something like that, right?
Basketball.
Yeah, there you go. Like, so just being on the bell end of tallness wouldn't do it. Like, you need also hand-eye coordination and all these other things that would kind of. Yeah, I'm just being pitnicky. I think I would probably agree with you, like with the percentages and being at the top end and stuff. But it's more like if we took like a average woman and that person right at this bell end, they'd probably be a little bit closer than I think that number would say, just because the sport, or depending on the sport. If it's a sport that pushes them really out of the extreme, then no, what you're saying, it would be right. But I think a lot of sports aren't like this one category thing or one human stat thing or something like that.
Yeah. I think in almost any case, we can't break it down to a single variable. That's just an engineering shortcut to say We have
I
to
get
pick
what you're
one.
saying.
Let's try to pick the one that has the most impact that we can measure.
Yeah.
And I think you're saying that sex or gender is not the most impactful
When it comes to
measure most of the
safety or
time.
fairness. Yeah.
Yeah.
At least when what I hear from these bodies, they don't, when they're talking about fairness or things like that, they're not talking about sex or gender. They're talking about weight or
Mhm.
strength or height or those
Yeah.
sorts of things. And those things do align biologically, but they definitely don't, like, it's not a one-to-one sort of thing.
Right.
So we should, if that's not the thing, like if we have these things that we can point to that are one-to-one, like strength or weight or whatever it is, use those rather than bringing it a step above where it's all muddy and isn't one-to-one.
Right. When sporting bodies use the word woman, what do they mean?
Yeah, that's them.
That's
So
them.
yeah, exactly. I'd hope that they would be using it like in the I guess societal term, like women's football or something like that, or women's sports, rather than female.
Okay. So when they established these, was that possible?
What are you asking?
Was
Sorry,
it possible for them to have meant what you mean? Like let's say they started a women's sport 100 years ago.
Right.
Could they
Probably.
have meant gender?
It depends where you go back, and if we're in England, probably not. If we're maybe in, I don't know, like somewhere in Africa, sure, they're totally different ideas of gender and stuff. But if we're talking about, Western, no, probably very strict and rigid, and was probably more aligned with like biological understandings than gender. If we're talking about 100 years, you go back other points along like Western culture, it gets a bit more open and a bit more aligned with how we are now. But 100 years and
yeah. So the edge case question that I would lead to, and I think you've already answered it, is when did it change? If you assume one thing's now and is different then, when did it change? And I think in this case, you're saying it's a very fluid change, and it probably isn't even in place fully yet. That some would say sex, some would say gender, and the definition of what woman means is depends on who you ask.
It depends what you're talking about when you're talking about when did it change. So if we're talking about, like, say, people exploring and thinking about gender and that being different from just recognizing their biology, I think that's existed forever, basically. It just depends how how accepting or how open or how aware a society was for where did it change? Are you talking about like people's understanding or people?
Yeah, what sports mean when they say women's sports? What a sporting body or a sporting
their definition.
When they say women's sports.
When did their definition change?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I guess it depends how old the sport is. If it's a modern sport, like if we got a new Quidditch team set or something like that, right?
Yeah.
I imagine like they would appeal to our modern definitions of biology and language and gender, and they would use, if they're using woman's to mean, they would probably use woman's to mean woman's, I would think. And if they're wanting to specifically gate out biological females, they would say this is a female sport. But because we've got that language now, that's how like doctors or whatever would use the language, or sociologists or whatever would use, like that's how we use this language now.
Yeah.
And we're kind of applying that looking backwards as well. But if we're talking about like like Western, or if we're talking about English, or maybe even, well, US, it's a bit hard, but English, like going back hundreds of years and how they would like understand that sort of stuff, especially like mainstream leaders or like scientists or people in power or whatever, right? Like politicians or scientific. Yeah, it's going to be like degraded from where we are now the further you go back, or less. I would say like the reality of where we are now would be less understood the further we go back. If we're talking just about academic terms or what's like definitionally, and that's what those organizations would be kind of using, right? Like what the scientists and what everybody's using at the time.
Well, I think we've solved the problem in sports. All they have to do is step away from a definition and find a more appropriate definition.
Yeah.
I guess the closest one would be less than 10 on a testosterone scale, more than 10, more than 20. I don't know.
To me, it all just depends on like that sports thing, because we've seen like people try and step in. We've seen people like try and step in with stuff like, I think it was either the Olympics or the Commonwealth Games, and like you see like they're trying to exclude trans women with the T counts, and then you see cis women being excluded because they over the T counts and stuff. And it's just like, this is not having the aim of what you set out to do at all. Like, just to use methods that would actually have these people compete in ways that are, you know, safe and fair. It's just so it just depends exactly what the experts basically would say, and you know, as long as the experts are kind of making sense, right? Like, it's not some like daft conspiracy theory that's run rampant in the F1 doctors community or whatever, right? But as long as they're in line and they're making sense,
driving cars real fast on track. Okay.
Or just the first sport that came to my mind, basically.
For sure.
As long as those doctors are like, you know, in line with the rest of doctors and they can be peer reviewed and all of that sort of stuff, like as long as they're actual doctors, then have those medical experts tell you. That's why they're experts.
Yeah. I do note that almost all F1 drivers are male.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't follow F1 all that closely, except from an engineering perspective. But I also note that a whole lot of F1 drivers are white or wealthy. So, you know, that's apparently the physicality is not the point.
Well, F1 is definitely an elitist sport, and they've been trying to kind of broaden that out, and especially in the last decade or so. But it's like it's definitely like you've got to be extremely. You've got to be in a go-kart from the age of like tiny or whatever, right? And have all this funding and stuff. So you've got to be super wealthy, basically. So
so it's an expensive one, like figure skating, to be able to develop at a high competitive level.
It's like yacht sailing. It's like not even like, it's like unicorn training level of expense. Not even pony. You know, it's like right up there.
Yes. I'm a Ferrari unicorn specialist.
But yeah, so F1, you know, if they're telling, basically I'm trying to say, you know, if there's some like group of 10 doctors that are in charge of F1 and they're like got some weird, they've been infiltrated by some weird conspiracy or something, then no, don't just always blindly trust what the doctors or experts are telling you. There could be case, but as long as that's, you know, not the case and it's they're actual doctors or doctors who are reasonable, or however you'd phrase it, then sure, that's why I would appeal to them, because they have expertise.
This subset of the claim.
Mm-hmm.
Trans people are real or do exist.
Yeah.
You make that claim.
Yeah, so I guess this claim would be like against people who might be easy to analogize it with like gay people. They'll say like gay people don't exist really. It's just like kind of a choice, or it's just like they kind of deny that inner thing that gay people are reporting, like who they are or what they feel like, you know, they see the attraction.
You don't really like penis.
Yeah, that inner reporting.
Because Romans 1:20 tells me so.
Yeah, so it's not, gay people can't exist because, you know, whatever, God can't make people gay or things like that.
Right. It's only when they give themselves over to a reprobate mind.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it's a claim basically countering that, and it's basically analogous.
Okay, so so trans people exist because people experience transness and report it. Yeah. That's our proof that trans people exist.
Right.
Okay.
The self-reports of them, just like we have the self-reports of gay people, and I mean, like, every gay person could be lying and acting out to prove the lie and not really be gay, but like, come on. Like.
So that's what gay mean. What gay would mean? Pretending you're gay.
Right. Like trans means pretending you're not the, you know, gender.
Right. I just threw that in to throw embers on the fire. I just messing. Okay. So, what's it like to feel trans? Do you know?
Well, I'm non-binary myself.
Okay.
So it's not trans-binariness. So that I think that's a very different. There's some similarities,
Mm-hmm.
very different feeling.
Does
Myself, I
it
can give you.
qualify as trans, or does it qualify as a different word that isn't cis and isn't trans?
Well, it depends. So the way I define trans, and most trans people define trans, how I said it earlier, is not identifying with the gender you assigned at birth.
Mm-hmm.
Non-binary for me would fit into that. So non-binary for me is basically the kind of a couple of ways to explain it. So I'll just rattle them off, and hopefully some of them will make sense. It's kind of like when I was growing up, all these people would tell me these things that are supposed to be rules or expectations, and they just didn't make any sense to me. They just seemed completely arbitrary. And they sometimes people would like expect or put things onto me, and then I would be like, well, that just isn't me, doesn't feel like me, it's not who I want to be, or it isn't me. And then like when you're an adult and you're kind of thinking about like these structures and things like that, I understand why it like kind of appeals to other people, but yeah, for me it's just this thing that I don't it's just I don't feel one thing or the other towards it. Like if I say I am a man, it just doesn't feel right. Now I can imagine what other people were like feeling and connecting to. So it makes sense in kind of an abstract way. But to me, like I am a man or I am a woman, it just doesn't fit me. It just isn't me.
Neither one of them makes sense.
Right.
Is there another word? Is there another term?
Well, it's non-binary basically, but that's basically
which basically means neither of these two.
Right, yeah. So it's just Addison or just a person. It's just how do I say this?
A person of indeterminate gender. See, this is a problem that I have with non.
The way
I actually have a
here's the way that you might
revulsion against terms that are only defined in their
I know
in the negative.
But a good way that might help you with this is with atheists or atheism or something like that. My only interaction with gender is this thing that other people have described to me that doesn't make sense. They have their definitions for it. It fits. So it's like I'm like this. You're an atheist, right? And like you hear about God all your life, and it's like, okay, I get how you're seeing that and how it like works with you, but it just I don't feel that. Or especially if you've never had a spiritual experience or something like that, you're that type of atheist. It's just completely foreign to you. It doesn't map onto you. You can't feel it. It's not you inside it. Okay.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to call myself an atheist, and atheists definitely fall into the two categories.
Yeah,
that matters a lot, actually, whether they're ex-theists or always atheists.
Yeah, well, especially if like maybe some theists would identify because they haven't had that spiritual feeling or that connection as well, and they were just kind of maybe it was an abstract mental thing for them, or a logical argument that convinced them or something. But yeah, like to me, it's gender is kind of like this religion thing that other people have like focused on and made rules about, and you've got to accept like with sins, and so you've got to fit in certain ways to be a good Christian or a good man or a good woman or those types of things. And I'm just like, this just seems like a load of like if we go to another planet, the aliens aren't gonna be like doing this shit. Like, are they gonna believe in Jesus? Are they gonna be, like, no, like, and so that's my experience of gender and how I feel how I label myself non-binary. I'm non-binary in the way to gender as an atheist is to religion.
Are there aspects of you that if you just looked at that one aspect, it would clearly drop you in a male or female, or no, sorry, men or women camp?
For other people, yeah. For the way I see it, no. Because it's like if you had two religions, and it's like, would that make you a Muslim? And it's like, well, no, Muslims are kind of claiming it or something. It's like that's just a human experience. But if you're talking about like just how to, like if we're taking me out of it and like most of society, what can they categorize things and where would they put you? Would that categorization technique put you in man or woman? Yeah, there are some aspects that would place me in man or
externally.
woman.
Sure. Are you physically cis male? No, are you physically male?
Yes.
Okay. By the way, I consider right now that Jamie is physically female.
Okay.
But her sex is male.
Okay.
So no, I guess I'm not going to say physically female. I'm going to say she externally appears female.
Mm-hmm.
And I take her word that that's the case when she's naked.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. What else do I want to? Is there any other things past this ellipsis that you'd like to address? And if I've not gone far enough in any one of these, please just put me right in there. This is your show.
Well, I like
but I want you to try.
I like you directing it.
Okay, good.
So same question back at you. What would be the ones that you're thinking are the most interesting ones, or the ones that would be better for the audience or better for yourself to investigate?
Okay. Trans people are
maybe what's the claims you hear the most in the sort of opposite direction or something like that, or a claim that you've heard that's opposite.
Yeah, the one I hear the most is you can't change the definition of words. Words are not polysemous. They don't have multiple meanings, and you're not allowed to change the meanings of words. And I say, oh, that's awful and artificial.
I know, gay. I mean,
awful and artificial. It meant almost the opposite of what they do mean now.
That's literally.
Yeah, it's literally literally meaning figuratively.
Yeah. But like, I know, mate. Like, it's just okay. Tell that to gay people, and like, are you gonna call? I'm sure those people that you're talking to. I'm sure you use the word gay if someone says they're gay, right? You're not gonna be like, excuse me, if we are not using that word gay, that means happy, or like that sort of thing.
Well, that too, but
yeah, it's like, oh, God's sake, I don't know. It's just. I think this is one of those like putting a flagpole in the ground on a wider issue, and they're like fighting the battle here. And I don't think this is an actual battle, because they would, if they did care about this flagpole, like words can't change, they would be different in pretty much all of their life, because words have changed in all aspects of their life, and they're not pedantic or annoyed or focusing on those. They ignore them or use them. Yeah. And so it seems like maybe the people that you're talking to who bring this up to you operate differently, but it seems like anybody I've heard bringing this claim either doesn't notice where they're doing it, or happily like adopts the new usages of words and will argue for them changing, but just not in this one case. So it seems like a case of special pleading or something like that.
So I spoke with somebody, if I remember, maybe I'll drop a link in the description, but you can just look on my channel. Drag
Juggling lessons.
Yeah, juggling lessons is a channel, and this is probably
subscribe now. Like and subscribe.
You said it. I didn't. Not that I absolutely won't, but it's not my habit, and that's fine. Let's see. The question was, should drag queens perform for children? And the arguments presented against were drag queens are criminals, drug users, and pedophiles.
Okay. I mean, that is an argument. Really? That is an argument.
Yeah.
I mean, the let me steal, man. The closest one that I guess I would find reasonable is like, I would label it as a misunderstanding that drag is just sexualized or sexualization or something like that. And you can't have a non-sexual
usually I see
drag.
a nitpicking where they take what really looks like a burlesque show that's being performed by drag performers with children present, including one particular little cut little scene where a kid puts $1 in the stocking.
Yeah. There's very few circumstances where that would be like.
Yeah, that's a really unusual thing, and
I mean, if that was a completely non-sexualized thing, and well, I mean, if it's like a completely non-sexualized thing, but it's so hard to detach putting money in the lining of someone's underwear as non-sexual, right? Like, in that especially given the context of someone who's like undressing, and I'm guessing they were dancing, maybe in provocative ways or something like that.
Maybe.
So,
I have a PTSD experience, a very, very strong, vivid, bright, horrible memory from when I was, I don't know, 5 or 6. My grandparents took me to the circus, and there was an act where a very masculine top hat, tails, tuxedo-y guy comes out,
like a ringmaster.
Yeah, and he was a performer with a whip.
Okay.
And there was a woman in a sequined, what do you call, like a sequined, I think of it as a swimsuit, but you know,
okay,
a one piece leotard, you know, cut up high the legs, and the, you know, very, very shape showing, and
showgirl dancer.
Yeah, showgirl thing, all those kind of things, and she got up there, and he whipped the sequins off her thing. Now,
I hope that was like a magic trick and they're not actually, but oh god, if they are.
Okay. First of all, extremely sexualized. It was a strip show because underneath the sequins, it was a flesh-colored unitard thing.
Right.
And holy crap. And that just messed with me really bad. So was I being given a sexualized display of a strip show that was heterosexual, and everybody was going, "Oh, look, isn't that?"
I mean, there are cases where it's
no idea
less grey than that, right? Like you see kids being taken to Hooters, and that's clear sexualization of the presentation of a woman, right, or whatever. So
Hooters.
The key point I want to make,
not because I'm anti-sex.
The key point I want to make is
other thing.
The key point I want to make is it's not like I'm not doing a whataboutism. It's not like it's okay for a trans.
I'm saying it's not okay to take kids to that circus.
Right. Yeah.
Because it's sexualized and it's
or it's just something that like we need to think about, right? So it might be okay if you were introduced to sexual things in a way that made you aware of them and able to deal with them or something like that. But then, you know, it's talking about what age do you do that? Is there an age where that becomes less utility for safety or these confusion understanding thoughts, and it is damaging or something like that? But it seems like whatever age you were at, it would have been useful for you to have some introduction to understanding sex and these sorts of things because you're noticing it. So if you're going to be noticing it, it's helpful to have some sort of what am I noticing, what's going on, like guidance, I guess.
Yeah. And I think the issue that really messed with me was the BDSM part of the sex.
Yeah.
Because I also saw people parading around in dancy clothes at the beach, you know, whatever, and that didn't fuck me up. Yeah. But with the whip and the performance with the sequence,
and another child could see the exact same performance and just not have those things triggered for you. So yeah.
I'm sure I was in the minority of reactions in that crowd.
That's why I do agree with you when you say like maybe that child shouldn't have gone, but it's more like, I guess the way I would rather tackle it is like, could you try to change the way society educates or whatever to make it like, if all of society thinks it's okay for kids to kind of see those things at certain ages, you want to make sure that they're prepared to, or if they're going to be recognizing them at certain ages, and society is going to be putting them where they see them, is the way I would probably want to phrase it.
Yeah.
Then you would want to make sure that if they're at the age where they can notice them, they have education for it and they can understand what they're noticing.
The only prior experience I had of any of that was like cowboy movies, where you're talking about violence up unto death being portrayed, or my parents wailing on me with their belts because I grew up in a strongly Christian household, and therefore violence on tiny children was normalized.
I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah.
But so basically I kind of agree with everything you said with in regards to like talking about that situation and like the sexualization or the education and aspects.
Now I'm going to get to the normative claim, because so far we've been talking about definitional claims. What is? But now I'm going to talk about what should be. Trans people are valid and should be accepted. I think those go together. I don't think I'm making two separate claims, although if you want to, I can change it up. Because really, the should be accepted part is what I want to get to. Do you think that's true? Trans people should be accepted?
Yeah, well, yeah, if they're they shouldn't be not accepted for being trans. Like if they're an evil trans person, I don't accept them for their evilness. But yeah.
So I have a violent felon bank robber who kills people. Should I accept them?
If they're again pedantic Addison, if they're willing to change and that sort of thing, accept them on that level. But not like
Okay, so I should accept them as a person with potential value, but that probably doesn't do anything about making them not go to prison.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. So for the reason of trans, that should be an acceptable reason. Or I should say that should not make them not accepted.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Should be accepted. Should be, because you're basically saying the same thing. It's just as baggage with that kind of like you hear pushback with like you see it around pride, right? Like why do you want to be proud of being gay? And it's not like the proudness of being gay. It's like this the oppression and living in a get into the history and get into the point where you are now as a gay society, a gay person, acknowledging all of the strife, and that's what the proudness is about. So like, no, you shouldn't be accepted because you're trans, but you should be. You shouldn't not be accepted because you're trans.
Right. Yeah, I when I see pride, I see the positive expression of the term "I shall not be ashamed."
Yeah, right.
So society has tried to shame me. A whole bunch of people in society are still trying to shame me if I'm at a pride parade, and I shall not be ashamed. It's a revolution.
So as a response, yes, trans people should be accepted.
Yeah, and that's why straight pride is like, what does it mean? You shall not be ashamed of being straight?
Yeah.
Right. Well, only a minority of people would ever think you should be straight.
Like 10 people maybe in the world.
I can think of some religions that want to make being sexual at all.
Yeah,
so positive sex pride, that is a thing. Heck yeah. And that's the revulsion against sex is dirty, nasty, and something. Yeah. Okay. What changes in the world if trans people are accepted?
Oh, a lot. A lot of. How would you sum it up? The distress and mental issues caused by not acceptance would be reduced.
On whose part?
On the part of trans people, but then I also think on the part of wider society as a whole.
Okay.
So maybe if I
analogize, trans would benefit from trans people being accepted,
just like how I benefit from Black people being accepted.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah. I very much agree with you on this stuff, and I'm trying to stay neutral enough to stay in SE, and let me not throw cold water on any of that. I'm very moved by the sharp right line of suicide. Yeah. And the numbers for me, like my understanding of suicide is about 1% of the overall population. And my understanding in the extreme, trans and race and maybe queer, sexual, there's, if you intersex a bunch of different things, you can get suicide rates over 40%.
Yeah.
And
That's
so
like that's like a very common percentage in trans community. It's
yeah,
more
it's
recent things are
crazy
showing it's
high.
a bit higher. Yeah.
Yeah, and the thing that, and here I am arguing for your side. Oh well. The thing that that I see is that the same person with the same category in a trans accepting community has a third or a fourth of the suicide risk.
Yeah. And we see this, this is like looking at data and studies and the science for those people who want to filter those things. Yeah, we see this, we can do it down to individual factors. So we've been able to identify that the biggest individual factor is a person's parents and immediate family. And that drastically can reduce suicidality rates and attempts of suicide.
Yeah.
And then it's there are percentage points you can look at for like what type of job someone has. So if someone's like a civil servant or in a position of civil power, and they're a person who's receiving transphobia from someone like that, they're more likely to harm themselves or things like what we've been talking about than other like the postman or something like that.
So it starts with the social network and then goes to authority figures.
No, those are just two examples of how we can even very precisely like pinpoint these things.
Because those are very observable. Yeah. It's just like my observability of the suicide number I don't think that strongly correlates with thriving outside the suicide category, but it's certainly an indication. And I'm not sure it's causal. I bet there's lots of trans people that thrive like crazy and don't have any issues. I also think there are people who have had suicidal ideation who are otherwise thriving.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay. I like to end on hypotheticals.
Okay. I
haven't asked for your confidence on this particular normative claim. I think it's just very high. But what could make you significantly more convinced? What's something you don't know? This would be a new piece of data that you don't know that would make you more convinced that trans people should be accepted.
Something that would like kind of reinforce the structural way I'm thinking about this. So like if we found hundreds of races of aliens and none of them had concepts of like gender or split, I mean that would kind of, I guess.
I mean they had a concept of sex but not gender?
Yeah, or like sex is just kind of just used in like non-societal. Yeah, if we're using my definitions, yes, sex and not gender. Yeah.
Okay.
But I'm thinking maybe would that stray into like areas of like argument from ad populum or something like that. So maybe.
Well, I think ad populum arguments are bad for coming to hard conclusions.
Yeah.
But I think they are great for steering your Bayesian priors or your default position or your starting position.
Or like what would give like
wisdom of the crowd is a real thing.
Judging utilitarian outcomes and things like that.
Yeah.
So yeah, something like that maybe. Let me try and think of like a completely different thing that would maybe strengthen. Oh well, there's the thing that did strengthen. So looking at reputable scientific data studies, or on the other end, kind of gathering evidence. So studies or data or anecdotal, speaking to trans people and things like that. So yeah, evidence gathering would be another one, I guess.
Okay, what kind of evidence would it be?
So data, studies, things that like dissect these ideas and look into them and try and deconstruct them and show how they mechanically work or whatever.
So you're looking for methodologically sound collected information.
Yes.
And I assume it would. What would the data indicate that would raise your confidence?
So it would this kind of I guess I call it the structure of how I think about these things, or like the overall kind of. Let me think about it in SE terms, like the foundational claims maybe, or the branches above. They're kind of I'm trying to maybe analogize, maybe like science, like you've got these kind of like core, these not goals, these not ideals, principles, and like if you kind of see those principles being like acted out through with science, you see them being like reinforced by kind of doing science or whatever. You're bringing up your whole foundation of how you understand science or how you understand that kind of topic. If we got like more data on, say, on the things that I'm thinking of, like with this claim, it would be like strengthening that kind of field of knowledge and like the whole like root system of how we like think about this field, or I don't really know how to say it.
I think let me see if I got an inkling here. If we found data that more firmly established like the involuntariness of transness, or a distinct measurable component that was less subjective about transness, is that the kind of thing?
Oh, well, I think the thing that I was answering is how, if you got that evidence, what would be strengthened?
Your opinion that they should be accepted, the kind of thing that should convince a lot of people to accept.
I think I think something's gone over my head here, so I'm
fine.
not following you.
Let me
so
go for the other
apologies.
hypothetical. I think you answered the hypothetical plenty well enough.
Okay.
We started
I think
getting
maybe when I
details
was
and went into fuzzy.
Yeah, I just kind of
definition
lost
reasons.
myself on something.
So
Apologies. If
the
you want to ask
last
again,
hypothetical.
or
No, I think you answered the question, and then I went down into detail, and it got muddy.
Okay.
Because I think the questions doesn't matter. So this is the other hypothetical, and it's the downer.
Okay.
What would convince you, a new idea that would convince you that it's less good for trans people to be accepted?
So it's easy kind of just to mirror the last one, like more data showing, this is harmful, or it causes the extreme, it causes suicidality, or it causes depression, or things like that, in a way that like is not tied to like some unjust thing that we should probably change about society. If it was surely not that, and like I don't know, it's just like kind of self-harm or something at that point. So if we had data to show it was like some sort of self-harm or something like that.
I think that's the trans regret argument. The notion that some people will transition and make an irreversible choice and regret it, and therefore be harmed.
So let me, because that doesn't kind of make me go down, but let me try and explain why. So it's like as a whole. So like if you have a couple of people, well, it's an interesting side point that elective surgeries, like trans elective surgeries, very low regret rates compared to stuff like knee surgery or hip surgery or any kind of like, so not even
surgery. It's like you'd regret having that. Why? Because complications made it worse than the benefit.
Okay. Like I think some of those elective surgeries are like 40% or something like that. So it depending on where you look at them, and like which age group and things like that. So if you're having like hip surgeries and an old person, it's got quite a high regret rate. Knee surgery is quite high as well, and I think the stuff to do with even stuff like heart surgeries and things like that can be, if you're looking at comparing it to like trans stuff, because the trans stuff is like really, really low regret rates. It's like if you're talking about, well, it depends what
on the order of 1%, on the order of 10%.
Yeah, it depends what like specific surgeries you're talking about, or usually they'll like branch it out into like transition as a whole, which would then cover all the elective surgeries, and even those are around those figures that you just mentioned. If not even, like those would be like high, like because when you look at the reasons why people in that 1% transition, it's usually like the actual thing that you're talking about, surgery regret, is like 0.1% or something.
Wow.
A lot of the time it's like societal pressure and non-acceptance and things like that. So like if you compare it to like traditional surgeries, like elective surgeries, never mind like the gender surgeries that people don't like notice, like hair plugs or breast increasements or height surgeries or things like that, which have huge rates of regret.
I had a friend who
It's
had
like
a breast reduction and lost a significant her nipples and the touch on the side of her breast was one of her biggest sexual turn-ons, and the breast reduction surgery messed up her sensitivities in those areas. And she has regret for that side effect significantly. She got the breast reduction for back reasons. She's still large-breasted, but her natural breasts were messing with her posture really bad.
But so there are those types of surgeries, like those would be included in like the heart ones or whatever, or the hip ones. But then there are even like like cis people, these transphobes will have they'll point at like gender affirming surgery, but then not notice like like hair plugs or like height adjustments for men, and those aren't like those are they are a need, they are a healthcare need if it's affecting your mental health, but it's that in the way that the transphobes are thinking about it, if I adopt their language, it's not a mental health need, but they don't see an issue with those sorts of things or whatever. It's like kind of a...
I want to compare, and I don't have this data. I want, if somebody in the audience would find it for me and send it to me, I could be lazy. I want to know the regret rates between breast augmentation surgery, I'm assuming cis females, as compared to trans regret from surgical stuff, which I might find you one little thing to several things on the other side.
I can find you whatever divisions of the trans regret stuff you want.
I would love
if you
that.
want it, if you want certain surgeries or whatever.
I will.
I've got that all on the bookmarks. So.
Yes.
And I've got some comparisons versus these elective surgeries that we kind of. So, I guess to roll it all back.
Yes. Send it all.
The way
to me.
I think about this, the way I think about like the trans regret stuff is the way I think about elective surgeries or other surgeries. And if I'm consistent, like I am with say hip surgeries and things like that, like I should say that these things are a benefit overall, and these things are choices, and these things are things. So if I apply the same thing I would do with like hip surgery or hair plug surgery or breast reduction surgery, and we look at the regret rates and we see that they're lower and these sorts of things, then surely that should be the same thing I would apply there, unless there's some other reason, and there doesn't seem to be some other reason. So
I really want that regret data.
Okay. And then there's also like the other side of it of how much, whether it does improve or not, right? So if it wasn't like, if they didn't regret the surgery, but it like didn't, so like let's say there's not like surgical complications, or they got exactly what they wanted from the surgery. It's not like the surgery gave them something like wrong or something like that. There might be like it might, you probably would categorize it under surgery regret, but just to make clear, like there could be stuff outside of that, those two things I mentioned, where it's like
I want to separate out the surgery did not have the intended result. Like a common result in the case of breast augmentation is they record whether the patient thinks the breasts are too hard after they have settled in, and then there's a separate category for the patient and the doctor think the breasts are too hard after
interesting,
which it takes a while. After they're hard at first, and then it softens as the body does the stretchies and the whatever. So but that's not a regret for having the surgery. That's a regret for the outcome of a surgery, which is probabilistic to some degree.
But it kind of depends. Like some people, or some ways that you might or I might think about it, we would call that elective surgery regret. And then sometimes, like how you're thinking about it now, you want to gate it out and just focus on the maybe the like that's a societal thing. Maybe you'd want to like focus on just issues in
when
surgery.
I want to separate out whether they regret a bad outcome versus regret having gone for the outcome.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like, did the outcome was fully achieved, but that didn't have the intended effect, or it had a different effect, or the opposite, or a negative effect, or So I guess to roll it back even more, if you could show me in the way that how I'm viewing like elective surgeries and that sort of framework, and this viewing it as a whole rather than just seeing one person totally regret their hip operation. Oh no, that's a travesty. We should never do a hip operation. The whole, now you understand the way I'm kind of thinking about it as a whole and that structure.
If somebody got a hip operation and then got a bad infection, they could really regret the infection without regretting having gone for the hip operation.
Yeah.
Except that maybe they didn't like their probabilities when it came out the other side. Yeah.
All sorts of different kind of setups you could do with that.
Oh, and I want to put everybody who dies during surgery as I'm going to check them off as regretting.
That would.
I'm going to just assume they regret that.
Yeah. I mean, there's maybe 1 in a million that like it's their suicide. It's their way of committing suicide. Sure, that's probably a safe
suicide by general anesthetic.
Yeah. You never know. I mean, if I knew I was allergic to anesthetic somehow, that might be a
If you knew you had a special likelihood of dying of it, then that would definitely
maybe put your family at I mean, hey, that might be a reasonable
that would
choice
solve
for
a life
somebody.
Insurance question.
Family issues and stuff. So you never know. But I guess to roll it back, like I was saying, the way I'm viewing like this as a whole, blah blah blah, structure thing. If we saw, just like if we saw with like other elective surgeries, that number increased like so much, or to the there's this balance of how utilitous it is and that sort of thing, and how much benefit we get. If we saw that trans-affirming care as a whole, or surgeries or specific surgeries weren't working or something like that, that would kind of affect this structure I was kind of talking about. That's like a layer back or whatever, and that would kind of affect whether I would maybe lower my confidence.
Excellent hypothetical, very clear, understandable by a lot of people, and I think it's easy for people to imagine the result of, or being moved by those even relative data.
One thing I do want to say whenever I talk about this topic is, as a as a trans person or someone who's supporting trans people, like trans regret and people who trans surgery regret, or whatever you'd call it, that's something that's super like a key thing. It's something that you don't want to. I don't think trans people do forget about it, but it's something that you want to like make sure you when you're speaking on these issues, like me or other people, it's something that you should not forget to mention, I guess is a way to put it, because it's like when we're talking just about like we need these things, we need these rights, we need and then you are seeing these tiny, in my eyes, a tiny percentage of people. It's kind of easy to like see me say, no, it's a tiny percentage of people, and putting them to the side, and it's almost, you could get this impression that you're ignoring them, or you don't care about them, or you're minimizing like the awful, like if you look at some of those experiences that some of those people had, it's absolutely awful. But you want to, it's more like, obviously those people who have those bad knee surgeries or whatever, it's absolutely awful, and you want to make sure that that doesn't happen as much, and that the systems are better, that that person wouldn't have gone for that surgery, or made a better choice, or whatever it is. But it's so I guess it's but you also want to make sure that you're fighting for the rights, or the stances, or the things that the principles that you're trying to claim. So just want to make sure I definitely mention that, give a bit of time to that as well, because that's something that as a trans person I care about. And like I care about if cis people are having gender issues and struggling with their gender identity, and if they end up realizing that they're cis in the end, that's brilliant, like them being out of that turmoil and that struggle. So obviously don't want anybody to struggle with that stuff.
I've never personally met anyone with trans regret.
Same.
So if you ever find somebody who is willing to talk to me,
Mhm.
that has trans regret, I wanna hear them out. I wanna understand the whole thing. Anyway.
Yeah, I've seen some people on Twitter just in passing. So that might be the way I've come across those accounts is I follow prominent trans
Sure.
activists, and they'll
Yes.
put things out, and then there's every now and again you'll see a reply
Sure.
from a regret. So it might be, if that's an area, if something you really want to look into, you could, I guess, find those people online.
I have a Twitter account. Twitter is just,
or your preferred platform,
yeah,
Facebook,
right. But if you have interactions with somebody, I would love to.
Yeah,
for you to
that's
make an introduction. That would be
I
delightful.
guess that's the
I
biggest.
promise to be very kind.
No, he's forcing me to do this. He's gonna lock me up again after the video's finished. But that's where I live.
Put me in the box.
That's
Don't
my
put me in
tent
the
where I have to. He's gonna shove me in there again. No, I guess that's just the closest I've come to anybody in that, like, is just kind of seeing them reply to trans activists on Twitter.
Yep. Okay. Yeah. I sometimes I admit that when I see people reacting like that, I suspect the same thing as when an apologist says, "I used to be an atheist." To me, that I've seen so many examples where that I wouldn't say they were. They were for 15 minutes between two songs, two sections of being a theist for 15 minutes. They thought about it. That's an extreme example. It's easy for me to doubt the genuineness of somebody saying, "I'm an example of that thing you've never heard of." I'm
That's
not
really interesting.
Out of hand. It's just doubt. It's not rejection. It's an important difference.
That's really interesting, because thinking about myself, I feel like I do have grounds for doing it with atheism or like Christianity or something like that. If someone's like, "Oh yeah, I was a Christian for a day,"
yeah,
but then I kind of feel
Armin,
like
he was only a Christian for like 2 years or 3.
Well, no, if it's like I know that, to me, I was only a Christian for a year, but I still think I was a Christian.
I think so too.
But so when it comes to like, for some reason, I'm trying to think why there's something that's very slightly different going on in my head, and it's like I don't have the grounds to talk on that. I can only talk about it for me, and I wonder if it's because. That's interesting. I'm wondering, maybe I'm either inconsistent with that, and I should probably apply the same standard to maybe Christians and operate still in the same way. Like, it doesn't matter the label; it's more just how long they believe what they actually believed, and something like that. Which I think is, again, the issue would be the same thing with the gender. It's more like the label isn't exactly important.
Right. If somebody claims that they a thing, it matters only
what
if they're
baggage
using
is
that claim to convince me of a position.
Yeah, the baggage. Yeah.
At which point, so now I doubt my doubt.
Yeah.
And that's why I want to have personal interaction and not just something that happens on a tweet thing. Because I can calibrate a little better. Maybe I'm not a great judge of people, but there's a little there. I would love to really one way or the other more clearly.
That's a really good area of that's an aporia zone, an aporia location in my mind. So yeah, there's either some inconsistency, which it might not matter, or I don't know if you can hear the kids screaming outside, so apologies for that if you do. It might matter, or it might not actually matter, because it might not be like logic. It might not play into any arguments or something. Or it might be the way it feels as if there's like some difference in the way I'm like viewing it logically, or there's some like different, like a utility or something. Because it's like I'm wondering if there's a difference between the thing that my brain's going to is like, it's what you are rather than like an abstract thing you are considering. But then I can kind of say, well, no, you at that point you are a Christian, or you are a. So yeah, I need to think more on that. A lot of aporia on that one. It's interesting.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And on that note, do you have any last things you want to say before we wave? And
other than thank you very much. I always enjoy these conversations with you. This one's been absolutely brilliant. And please keep doing this and keep doing what you're doing, because I think it's got a lot of value. So thank you for doing that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for participating. Thank you for and thank you for all of the behind the scenes and everything else in our history past. We didn't have the rapport showing here because Addison and I have been friends and supporting each other for a good while. Thank you, friend.
No problem. Thank you for everybody watching. I know Darley's not going to call to action, so I'll do it for him. Subscribe, SE channels, official channels, juggling lessons, all of those things. You know, socials, Twitter. You get more stuff like this, but in like other ways. Maybe you get a good SE, well, not to Darley, but tweet from the SE Twitter channel, or you get a really good short form video on the SE channel, or you get a juggling lesson. So go and subscribe. What are you waiting for, guys? There we go. Seeing as you won't do it, Darley.
Thank you. All right. We'll see if that helps. That's good. That'll be good. All right. So the AI will trigger if we both wave.